the Ukrainians are running out of shells for Russian T-72 tanks, which they actually need, and they're running out of shells for Soviet artillery. So how do you find them? Can you manufacture them? That's another big question.
We'll start this morning with developments in the Ukraine conflict. Reports in the last few hours of explosions in Kyiv. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says that the blast hit the city's central Shevchenskivsky district. It comes as the US is poised to supply Ukraine with the advanced Patriot missile system in order to combat long-range missiles fired by Russian forces. A formal announcement is expected in the coming days, but the Times reports that it's still awaiting final approval from President Joe Biden. Let's speak to Steve Erlanger, Brussels correspondent for the New York Times. Morning to you, Steve.
Good morning.
Tell us about the politics of this, because we're often told in this country that American sentiment towards Ukraine can cool a little bit. Is it straightforward for Biden to approve these Patriot missiles?
It isn't straightforward. I think one of the reasons for the leaks is to make sure he does approve them. It puts pressure on him. Joe Biden has been very carefully calibrating weapons to Ukraine and their ranges to ensure that NATO doesn't get into a fight with Russia. Now, Russia doesn't want to get into a fight with NATO either. Everyone wants to keep it inside Ukraine, of course, except Ukrainians. So this is the real difficulty. It's not so much support in the US, which is fairly strong, as it is all over Europe, but this other worry that the Ukrainians will get the bit in their teeth and will use longer range weapons to drag NATO into the war. So that's the problem. And they're also very expensive, Patriots, and they're pretty scarce. You know, each Patriot missile costs about $3 million. So they don't want them being fired off at Iranian drones that cost $20,000.
Yeah, but are they game changers? I suppose that Ukraine, we speak to politicians from there all the time. They're constantly looking for game-changing armory, things that might actually make a difference. Is this more of a symbolic thing, or Patriot missiles will do something, do you think?
Well, they'll do something, but I do think there's a lot of symbolism involved. I mean, one Patriot battery maybe, has 8 missiles or so. The big question will be where will they go? I mean, where will they actually put them? Will they put them around Odessa? Will they put them around the capital, Kiev? I mean, they don't have a lot to spread around. There are cheaper systems that they are giving them, like Hawk missiles, which work pretty well. And then there are other things they can use against drones. So I suspect, the Patriots isn't going to suddenly give Ukraine full air defense. I think a lot of it is symbolic.
And can they put in conditions on this? Because we've spoken, I remember we spoke to an armed forces minister here who said he was relatively relaxed about weapons being fired into Russia provided by the Allies. That created a bit of a storm all the way to the Kremlin when he said that on this program, and he slightly rode back up it afterwards. So actually, can he say, do not fire these into Russian territory? Does that include Crimea, for example?
Well, sorry.
Yeah, will there be, I guess, can the US put conditions on this?
Well, they can try. I mean, one of the best ways to put conditions is there are 3 different missiles that fit into the Patriots, and they have different ranges. So it's like these famous HIMARS. The United States is not giving Ukraine the longest range of missiles, and I suspect that will be true also here, that they will give them more short to medium range missiles. Also, the Patriots, are good against ballistic missiles. I mean, less good against cruise missiles, and obviously they're not perfect either. But if the Russians are using big missiles to hit Odessa, for instance, the Patriots would be quite good at that, and also would provide more protection to the Ukrainian government inside Kiev. So I think the restrictions will be more in terms of what's provided to fit into the launchers. Also, let's be honest, it takes training.
Yeah.
I mean, these people will be trained, the Ukrainians will be trained, if this goes ahead, let's say, in Germany. Training is normally at least 6 months. Now, the Ukrainians are very smart and they can work a lot, and maybe it's 4 months, but the Patriots aren't going to suddenly arrive in Ukraine tomorrow.
Which also points to the fact that we're still in this for the medium term at least. And just finally on that point, Steve, what's the politics generally around Ukraine? Because in this country, it feels that whoever is prime minister, even if the Labour government comes in 2024, if the thing's still going on, then there will be a pretty uniform policy on Ukraine on all sides. Is Ukraine at all an electoral issue? Is it a thing where there'll be a split between Democrats and Republicans? How much do the Republicans want to be less hawkish, perhaps, in this area?
Not yet. I mean, we had some of it in the recent midterm elections. Basically, what the Republicans want to do is two things: is they support Ukraine. They don't want to be responsible for losing Ukraine, and so money will keep coming. But they want to really interrogate the Biden administration and how the money is being used. Is any of it being stolen? There'll be a lot of investigation of what's being spent and how. And the second thing they're going to do, which really is very partisan, they're really going to do all these investigations into President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his relationships in the past with Ukraine. Those will be embarrassing, no doubt. And that will be partisan. But in terms of military support for Ukraine, I think it's holding. I mean, the other big problem everybody's having is finding enough ammunition and shells to provide Ukraine, because after the Cold War, everybody shrank their arsenals and they didn't expect a land war inside Europe. So they changed the kinds of weapons they had. So now it's really becoming an issue. The Ukrainians are running out of shells for Russian T-72 tanks, which they actually need, and they're running out of shells for Soviet artillery. So how do you find them? Can you manufacture them? That's another big question, which doesn't have to do with politics, but has a lot to do with money.
Yeah. And it just shows that these things are all far from being settled, aren't they? Steve, great to speak to you as ever. Thank you for joining us.